It's an honour to have you here at the Saphira Centre of Shamanism, where we break down the ancient esoteric practices of shamanism and the occult, bringing them into balance with the deep psyche. My name is Luke, experienced practitioner and mentor of the shamanic and occult sciences. Thank you for joining me. It's an honour to have you here. Definitely find me over on Patreon, first link in the description if you're wanting to gain access to powerful occult path workings, rituals for numerous purposes, as well as in-depth guidance on advanced initiatory processes. There are full guidance collection sections, as well as full initiatory systems into the Sephiroth, the Glyphoth, the Necronomicon Gnosis, and much more, as well as many other systems and practices. Or if you're wanting something more premium, check out the Saphira Shamanic School in the first link of the description, which is a good opportunity to work closely with me. Definitely check that out. I look forward to seeing you over there. Today, we're going to be discussing the controversial but mysterious subject of the Succubi. Succubi are mysterious astral entities that appear within numerous traditions, and they are entities that you encounter numerous times if you are embarking on dark occult initiation, such as the Glyphothic realms. Succubi is a term that comes from the Latin term succuba, and that roughly translates to lie beneath, or what lies beneath. This basically refers to some extremely repressed entities within the astral plane, but this also mirrors repressed aspects of the psyche as well. Succubi can be tapped into for numerous different evolutionary purposes and can also help with numerous practical level things as well. For example, there are some succubi that are very good for healing. There are other succubi that are very good for dream work. In fact, all succubi are pretty good for dream work. And there are some which can only really be worked on for sexual alchemy. What we are referring to here are real astral entities, but on the psychological level, from a Jungian standpoint, these are beings that basically represent personifications of your most repressed sexual urges, with each succubi basically mirroring a different aspect of your repressed sexual energy. You encounter them within the Glyphothic spheres of Nehemoth, as well as the Glyphothic sphere of Gamaliel, ruled by Lilith and her sister Namar, as well as Golachab, ruled by Asmodeus. So there are different breeds of succubi that are basically responsible for different things within the astral plane and therefore correlate to different archetypal energies from within your unconscious mind. So we're going to be exploring this fascinating subject today, understanding how you can utilize succubi from an evolutionary point of view and what the real purpose of them actually is. Definitely stay tuned as we dive into the mysteries of succubi. So succubi, I feel, is more of a category of entity, a category of spirits that are basically responsible for sexual alchemy. So this means that there are many different entities that could technically fall under the category of succubi or succubus, meaning the same thing. Succubi are beings that are said to have fed off of the sexual energy of men in the dream state, but this alone is symbolic. Men in that context is symbolic of the masculine energy, the toxic masculine that holds society in place. Succubi feed off of the toxicity and the illusionary masculine traits that basically keep the primal feminine repressed. Let me repeat that. Succubi feed off of the illusionary masculine traits and masks that are responsible for repressing the primal feminine energy. So this basically means that from an alchemical standpoint, we encounter succubi to connect us to our most primal sexual urges. So this means that each succubi, from an evolutionary point of view, basically represents a different urge, a different perversion that needs to be processed and integrated. So basically what happens when you come into contact with a succubic entity is that there is a type of vampirism that takes place. They basically start vampirizing your energy field from the perspective of falsehood. Okay, they are vampirizing falsehood that is repressing sexual energy, and it basically causes repressed sexual urges to come through to the surface. This links directly to the evolutionary power and purpose of beings such as Lilith and Namar. These are some of the most powerful succubic entities and are definitely higher on the hierarchy. In fact, probably the highest on the hierarchy of succubic beings. However, there are some entities that are succubi that are also ascended masters slash ascended mistresses. Basically, primal aspects of repressed feminine energy. So if you look at Lilith, for example, Lilith is the archetypal representation of everything that has been repressed about the feminine energy, and she is a personification of those unprocessed aspects. And the beings that rule underneath Lilith are succubi, succubic in nature. So this basically means that if Lilith is the primary personification of your repressed sexual energy and your repressed primal feminine energy, then it basically means that the succubi that are underneath her are basically going to represent individual currents of your primal feminine energy on the psychological level. So when you initiate into the Qliphothic sphere of Nehemoth, ruled by Namar, Lilith's sister, or Gamaliel, ruled by Lilith herself, you are going to come into contact with succubi. Sometimes this happens by actually encountering sexual beings within the dream state. Sometimes you will see these beings astrally. Sometimes they will just come through in the form of uncontrollable sexual urges that you need to sit with, welcome, process, and integrate. So this basically means that when you initiate into these realms, the succubi basically gather towards you and start vampirizing that aspect of your field. As I said, there are different breeds of succubi, and succubi that basically mirror different aspects of the unconscious mind on the sexual level. For example, Namar and the succubi that serve Namar operate more on the physical level of consciousness. So if you initiate into the Qliphothic sphere of Namar, Nehemoth, also known as the sphere of Lilith, then you're basically going to be going through a level of physical succubic alchemy, whereby the succubi start to come through in the form of physical urges. Okay, Namar is a very physical, tangible sphere when it comes to the somatic sensations that you get in the body. So many people, including myself, report as soon as they initiate into Namar, they get basically a surge of very powerful Qliphothic energy that also has a very strong erotic feel to it as well. Okay, when I initiated into the sphere of Namar, it basically came through as an instant surge of energy, and my whole body was literally pulsating with sexual energy. Astrally, the Qliphothic sphere of Nehemoth tends to take on the form of the inside of a womb. It's like a cave, but it's filled with succubi that are basically running around, mirroring different aspects of you. What can happen when you initiate into Nehemoth is large amounts of physical fatigue. Basically, what is happening there is that the succubi are feeding drastically off of your physical vitality. But this is not the real physical vitality. This is basically masculine, wounded masculine constructs and toxic structures that are basically repressing the true primal essence. So it can feel like the succubi are feeding off of your physical vitality, but all they are doing is putting you into a receptive space to be able to welcome some of your most repressed physical urges. Whereas when you enter the sphere of Gamaliel, you are entering the shadow aspect of the astral plane, the shadow lunar energies. So these succubi, in my view, are more psychological, okay? They come through in the form of like distorted sexual visions, obscene images and all kinds of different things that are not acceptable in society. You may start feeling all kinds of different psychological sort of sensations and visions, as well as getting real sexual urges towards things that in society are just not acceptable. So what succubi really do is that they are responsible for bringing repressed sexual energy to the surface, vampirizing the illusionary constructs that are keeping these sexual urges repressed within the body and repressed within the nervous system, so that you can process, welcome, and integrate them. They have a huge impact on shame. Okay, sexual shame, anything that has basically been projected onto you as a result of you being in your self-expression. Succubi don't just rule over literal level intimacy and perverted images and impulses, but they also rule over your creative expression as well. So the medicine of the succubi is not just in release and allowing the sexual energy to flow through, but it's actually in learning how to redistribute the sexual energy from the lower parts of your field, from the sexual organs up into the higher aspects of your field, so that you can utilize the sexual energy for a variety of different purposes. And this is what makes succubi very unique and actually very dynamic beings to work with, okay? Because they represent the sexual energy, in processing and integrating, whether it's overt or covert level sexual trauma, you are basically sitting and processing and welcoming some of your deepest and most repressed desires. And in doing so, you are setting that life force that has been stuck within your nervous system free, so that it starts to roam around the system itself. For example, opening the clifothic sphere of Nehemoth breaks the shell around the root chakra and causes that sexual energy to literally emanate throughout the entire physical body. Whereas the sphere of Gamaliel has a much more psychological level aspect to that alchemy as well. A very interesting manifestation of succubi is in the clifothic sphere of Gola Chub, ruled by Asmodeus. And those who don't know about Asmodeus, definitely check out my video that I made specifically on Asmodeus and the alchemy of Gola Chub, because that's a very interesting video. But within this realm are held some of the more violent succubi, some of the more aggressive succubi that start to feed off of repression that you may actually want to keep in place to basically maintain your suppression of things that you have basically sworn to yourself and sworn to the world that you do not do and you do not feel. Okay, these can be sexual urges of the most unacceptable kind. It can be sexual urges when it comes to crazy things that are not accepted in our society, whether it's violation, violence, all kinds of different things, all things that if you basically leave them within your nervous system without letting them free and feeling them, then they're going to run the show from your unconscious mind. And this is what succubi really show you. They show you that these urges are already in here. They just vampirize the illusion that is around it, and it can manifest a lot of different types of sensations, both physically, psychologically, and sometimes even in the world around you. Succubi are beings that speak through the people around you. Sometimes you might even magnetize certain experiences that is a succubi speaking to you that basically resonates with a particular aspect of your sexual energy. For example, if you come into contact with a stranger, and then a stranger just starts saying something that isn't even remotely sexual in nature, and it may just start to trigger a repressed urge, and may just start to trigger all of this sort of erotic energy within you for no reason at all. This is an example of how a succubi can actually use physical vessels around you to communicate to you. And sometimes how they communicate to you is not even of a directly sexual or intimate nature. Sometimes it can be random things. And this is the point, okay? The succubi show you that the sexual energy is what rules the world. It's the energy of creation. And it shows you how it's been distorted and how desire itself has been distorted and refused ownership of. So each of these individual entities are going to represent individual psychological urges that need to be processed and integrated if you are to really start to use the sexual energy at its full capacity. Now, what happens when you do not work with a succubi, whether you go through an initiatory process and you try and ignore the succubi, or you don't want to go into the sexual level of consciousness and start working on that level of trauma? It basically causes those urges to get stuck in a particular portion of your field, in a particular portion of your nervous system, and basically causes those urges to keep coming through. An example here is, say, sex addiction, okay, addiction to sexual release. Okay, this comes from not basically acknowledging the void that was created, the empty space that was created through neglect from the feminine energy, or projections from the wounded feminine energy. So the wounded masculinity in the world around us that exists both within men and women is wired basically to create an external persona and create the illusion of development and the illusion of growth, and actually reject the very forces that are responsible for our liberation. And succubi fall under those forces that are responsible for our liberation. So this means that through the collective religious programming and the programming of the New Age spiritual community, it causes you to focus on masculine energy, focus on light, without exploring the dark feminine aspects of yourself. And the reason why you have to deal with these aspects of yourself first before you reach the later trials, for example, in the Cliffothic tree, you have to go through the spheres of Nehimoth and Gamaliel before you reach the other phases of initiation. And that's so that it provides a necessary foundation for you to be able to process and integrate the energy that is flowing through. It's the first point of initiation because it is very much the main pillar that is holding up your entire unconscious structure and your entire sort of mechanisms of suppression and protection from vulnerability that you learnt is not safe. So you have to face the sexual alchemy first within your day-to-day life and within your initiatory process if you are to be able to ground some of the later stages of the initiation. The reason for that is simply because the sexual energy is the pillar of creation and it runs the world. And the repression of it, the repression of the primal essence, is very much rooted within the mythology of our world, the Western mythology of Adam and Eve, and the snake being the force of all evil, causes us to completely shame anything relating to the snake, anything relating to fertility, anything relating to the primal feminine energy, and then focus on an aspect of false light. And this is what causes society's repressed sexual urges to leak through in ways that are extremely destructive, both to the collective consciousness and to the individual as well. Okay, so we need to look at almost the deeper level psychology of somebody who, for example, has received a certain level of trauma that causes them to, say, become a paedophile, or causes them to, say, go out and become a rapist. This is the thing. It's the sort of energy that people don't want to talk about. People want to avoid this energy and therefore are not able to find any form of relatability to people who fall under these titles of anything. It doesn't mean that by finding relatability, it doesn't mean that you're saying, right, I'm like that as well, or or yeah, I do have those traits. But it's actually being able to build a strong enough relationship with your shadow and a strong enough relationship with your own sexual energy to the point where you can see how distorted sexual energy manifests within the world around you. Okay, those who are like, no, no, it's them, oh, it's all them, putting it outwards. Okay, somebody they see, say a rapist on the news, and then they're like, oh no, no, it's them, shame, shame, shame. Doesn't excuse what the person did, mind. Okay, I'm not saying that it excuses what the person did, but if somebody is actually able to sit, be open and vulnerable, and find relatability within some of the darkest aspects of humanity, then that is a sign that somebody is on a genuine path of shadow integration. Whereas if somebody continues to separate themselves from those experiences, very triggering subject, but from those things, they are not owning the deeper succubi that dwell within their body. And when you get to the Cliffothic sphere of Gola Chubb, this is what you learn. Okay, you learn this very, very strongly. You see that you have to deal with these aspects of yourself, that you have to deal with these aspects of both yourself and the collective consciousness that are impacted by the energy that you emanate. Otherwise, it causes these urges to remain repressed in the collective, and this is why it causes, you know, these destructive sexual behaviors through violation, assault, all of these different things to unfold collectively. Okay, looking at the psychology and being able to see how somebody can actually become someone like that. Okay, and understanding how that can happen. And realistically, it all happens through the repression of innocence. Okay, and the repression of innocence is the biggest wound within the collective consciousness because the inner child is repressed, innocence is completely taken away, and it causes us to then build personas around these different child aspects of ourselves to basically overcompensate for the unmet needs. Those needs remain unintegrated and realistically unmet, which then causes these desires to become inverted and then come out in destructive ways. For example, the psychology of somebody who is a paedophile is somebody who has had their innocence completely molested. And this is exactly what the world around us does to the collective consciousness. Okay, the innocence is completely repressed, held within illusionary mental and societal level structures, and somebody who is actually attracted to innocence in that way is because somebody has gone through a significant process of exiling their own innocence to the point where they are so disconnected from the inner child that it causes these impulses to flood through in distorted and uncontrollable ways. Now, I'm not excusing any crimes that are committed in any way whatsoever. I'm not saying that such crimes, shouldn't have justice, because of course they should. But the thing that you've got to understand that by continuing to repress that energy in the collective and continuing to avoid these aspects within self is what gives these deeper level things power over you from within your unconscious mind. And this is the evolutionary power of the succubi. The succubi drain the wounded masculine energy, drain the vitality that is fueling the wounded masculine energy, and force you into a place of receptivity. This is why often in the Cliffothic sphere of Namar, it's such a dreamy and trippy sphere, purely because you're having these energies basically feed off of your body and feed off of your nervous system, but they're not feeding off of you. They're feeding, in a sense, off of the life force that is fueling illusionary constructs, that is keeping your primal energy repressed. And often the only way to actually connect to that primal feminine energy is to experience extreme levels of fatigue and actually experience a lot of physical fatigue to the point where you have to be still and you have to sit and feel these repressed things that have been lodged within your nervous system for an extensive period of time. I feel that there's also a link here to the Clithothic sphere of Satariel as well. Okay, and Satariel is the inverted feminine. Okay, is the dark womb of creation, and in order to really receive the medicine of that particular sphere, I feel the medicine also comes through fatigue. Okay, the Saturnian sphere puts limitations in place, basically surrounds you with spiritual fog, and causes you to basically have to just just sit where you are. Basically, just sit where you are with everything around you in complete limbo. And that, I feel, being a very feminine sphere in nature, is directly linked to the medicine of the succubi. I do also feel that succubi do dwell within Satariel purely because the true throne of Lilith is within Satariel. Okay, and even though the succubi are said to not actually dwell within Satariel, or should I say there's no sources that actually suggest that they do, there are definitely succubi within the Clithothic sphere of Satariel. Absolutely, because there's also a deep level of healing on the maternal level of consciousness that takes place within that space as well, and an integration of your dark feminine energy and being okay with things being sat in the womb. So succubi really are a very triggering current of energy. They are triggering energies to work with that very much operate on a very somatic level of consciousness. Okay, so if you get, say, all of a sudden you find yourself moving into erotic feelings or getting sexual urges as a result of, say, somebody not even doing anything sexual, that is often a succubi that is communicating with you, okay? But it comes through in the form of a psychological urge. What happens for most people is that they come through in the form of psychological and physical level urges, okay? All of a sudden you get like a random erotic feeling flow up through your body. That is likely a succubi that is communicating with you, particularly if it comes through in the mundane world randomly. Okay, often, particularly the Clithothic sphere of Gamaliel, in my experience, it does result in a lot of sort of repressed sexual energy coming to the surface at really random times. So it's like you may say, I don't know, be sat in the car or sat on public transport, and then all of a sudden you feel a big surge of sexual energy out. It feels like out of nowhere, but all that's happened is that that part of you then feels safe to flow through to the surface. Okay, there's no sort of timeline or any specific timing when it comes to the release of these repressed aspects of self. So when you've actually mastered the energy of succubi, and I don't feel it's anything that you can master fully, mind, because it's a constant process of integration. When you've mastered the energy of succubi to the capacity that you can, and you've healed a lot of that sexual energy or sexual rupture from within the nervous system, you can basically gain access to the other more dynamic powers of succubi itself. Because they are extremely feminine energies, they also help with, say, vampirism, showing you how to feed off of illusionary constructs, both within the cosmos and those around you. So they can help to train your energy body and nervous system to actually process and metabolize energy and embody the archetype of the Great Receiver. Very, very good for that. They are also very good, I feel, for healing as well. This is not something that generally comes up as a result of succubi, but I feel like healing, when it comes to actually generating additional life force within the physical body, supporting the body's natural healing mechanisms, as well as actual emotional healing and the transmutation of shame, succubi are amazing for that as well as lots of different types of astral related endeavors, astral travel, dream work, and other things relating to that as well. Literally anything that involves the sexual energy. For example, I've heard of people calling on succubi as a necessary force of life force and sexual energy in, say, crafting a healing ritual. So you may call on, say, a healing spirit such as the demon Veria or Veil 4 or other beings like that, and then call upon a succubi as well to provide additional life force to be able to ensure that the healing is able to flow effectively. Okay, so they really are very dynamic beings, very powerful and very dynamic beings that are some of the more triggering to work with. But if you're somebody who is, very connected to their sexual energy and connected to their sexual urges and, is not in a place whereby they are shaming themselves for feeling urges, even more obscene urges, because it's a natural part of being a human being, then succubi can actually feel very nice to work with and very pleasurable. But bear in mind that the caution that you have to take with succubi is that you're not supposed to act on everything. This is the thing, okay? This is the real sort of initiatory trials that come through with succubi, is that you are not really supposed to act on all of your sexual urges. This is the thing, okay? Obviously, it would be chaos. If everybody was acting on all of their sexual urges, it would be chaos. Basically, when a sexual urge comes through to the surface, the medicine of succubi is to actually let it flow through the system without actually taking action on it. For example, if you go into the clifothic sphere of Gola Chab and then start acting on everything, every impulse that's coming through, God knows what's going to happen. God knows. Daemon knows what's going to happen. Okay, so restraint and release, that balance between restraint and release, is often the medicine of succubi, very similar to the medicine of and the alchemy of Lilith herself. They also show you that sexual trauma does not just happen through overt means. Sexual trauma can happen as a result of anything that is covert that affects the child's self-esteem. For example, if the child is consistently sort of insulted or consistently not seen, then this is technically a form of what you could call covert sexual abuse. Okay, if somebody is, say, continuously criticized as a child, continuously sort of insulted in different ways that are hidden in dysfunctional behavior that is classed as normal, that's something that is intangible, that's hidden beneath the surface, that is then going to affect the flow of creative life force within the child. For example, if you say show your parents a drawing that you made as a child and your parents are like, oh no, that's a terrible drawing, for example, or don't give up your day job, then that affects the child's ability to actually emanate their creative flow. That affects the child's ability to actually allow their sexual energy to flow through freely, and will affect their self-expression, because they learn from an early age that they need to hold back on their self-expression, and that will likely pull through to the more intimate level of consciousness as well. How they relate to other people, how sort of comfortable they feel within actual sexual intimacy and things like that. So the medicine of succubi cannot be underestimated. Very powerful, very beautiful, but also can induce a lot of fatigue, can very much test you in terms of how willing you are to sit with these deeper aspects of yourself. They encourage you to find relatability in the darkest sexual fantasies that have been completely repressed in the collective, showing you that that's the only way that these things are going to stop unfolding within the collective consciousness. And when you get past that initial sort of noise with the succubi and you're integrating them effectively, then you can start to gain access to more advanced and more dynamic powers that can be used as a result of you building a stronger relationship with your sexual energy. Absolutely fascinating topic, but I think that's everything that I need to discuss in today's video. Definitely hit like and subscribe if this video was helpful to you. Definitely check out my memberships in the first and second links of the description of this video, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.